All right, so welcome to the second session of Deeper Questions. This is titled Scriptural Authority, Why Do Some People Use Holy Texts? And it's really the first in a two-part discussion of that topic. So we'll be covering some of the material specifically for today, and then we'll be bringing a little bit of the next session over, and we'll be discussing the two topics in tandem to some extent. And I've already passed out the handout for discussion 3 as well, so that's something you all can take with you. I have a couple of updates. First of all, we are audio recording this session again. I experimented around a little bit with my minimal computer technical skills, and I got the last session up onto YouTube, so that is available. If you go on the website, there's a link.
Wait, was it like visually recorded?
Audio, and then I superimposed some slides onto it.
Just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, it'll just be audio.
Okay.
So that will be available, so that if this thing takes off and we, because as we discussed last time, this is a pilot project, so I want to get a record of it.
You're not going to tag anybody in any way, are you?
No one's getting tagged. And what I did for last time, that's a good point. What I did for last time is, because the recording is over here and some of you are over there, so it wasn't, I cut out a chunk of the discussion. So for better or for worse, the people listening on YouTube have to listen to my voice for an even larger portion of the time than you guys have to. So I'll review the audio and just see how it goes. And obviously, if other people are putting themselves at risk by saying things, then I'll take that into account when I do editing and so forth. And I think we'll revisit the recording stuff in a bit more depth next time, just to see how that's going in general. In terms of marketing, thanks everybody for showing up. It's really kind of you. I'm still trying to contact the RSOs and work with them, and I know other people are inviting their friends and inviting people, and so that's fantastic. I'm still the one big demographic slice of the campus that we're still working on is are the Christian RSOs, and so I'm hoping to get one to fully sign on and sort of co-sponsor this. We'll work on that. And that may be accomplished this semester. It may take till later down the road, but we're still working on that. And any help anyone can have for me on that is very welcome. You can talk to me about that afterwards and so forth. Food is over there. Feel free to help yourself and get seconds and so forth as we're meeting out. Mind if people go back to the buffet and all of that. So those are the little housekeeping items. I'm going to jump directly into the group exercise, and this exercise I intentionally designed so that we're going in blind into it. And some people may have already guessed exactly why I've picked this and what's about to happen. We'll be doing it for about a half an hour, maybe 45 minutes. Other people may not have any idea for the whole 45 minutes what's going on, and you may think I'm asking a bunch of really weird questions that don't really have anything to do with anything. That's fine. If you're lost, just embrace your lostness, and that will be good. It all works out. It all works out in the end. Now we're focused here, and we're on page 9 of the discussion 2 handout. Page 9 is the text on the top, and we'll be focusing on that text for this exercise. And I was told once I have a really bad reading voice, so I have found one of the cool things about historical documents is sometimes there's audio of them online. So I'm going to just run that audio. That way you can hear something other than my voice for a couple of minutes. So let me detach from here and then get this going, and you can follow along there on page 9 if you like.
Beloved deeds, whom I love in truth. Beloved, I pray that in all respects you may prosper and be in good health, just as your soul prospers. For I was very glad when brethren came and testified to your truth, that is, how you were walking in truth. I have no greater joy than this, to hear of my children walking in the truth. Beloved, you are acting faithfully in whatever you accomplish for the brethren, and especially when they are strangers, and they testify to your love before the church. You will do well to send them on their way in a manner worthy of God. For they were not for the sake of the name, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. Therefore, we ought to support such men, so that we may be fellow workers with the truth. I wrote something to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to be first among them, does not accept what we say. For this reason, if I come, I will call attention to his deeds which he does, unjustly accusing us with wicked words, and not satisfied with this, he himself does not receive the brethren either, and he forbids those who desire to do so, and puts them out of the church. Beloved, do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. The one who does good is of God. The one who does evil has not seen God. Demetrius has received a good testimony from everyone, and from the truth itself. We add our testimony. You know that our testimony is true. I have many things to write to you, but I am not willing to write them to you with pen and ink. But I hope to see you shortly, and we will speak face to face. Keep speaking. Your friends reach you. Greet the friends. Find them.
All right, so that was that. Let me get this hooked back up here. So now I'm going to ask you guys 12 questions about what we just looked at. And some of it comes from the written exercise, and then some I've added. Here we go. And the penalty for not answering is you have to hear me talk more as I give the answer myself. Some of these will have multiple answers, and I'll be looking for multiple answers. So here we go. Number 1. Who wrote it?
Paul Tarkus.
All right. We got a Paul. Anyone else?
Well, it seems to me like someone in a position of authority. Or
Excellent.
just going from what's written.
So someone writing from a position of authority. That's
or at
good.
least relative authority.
Yeah, relative.
Authority
relevant.
over the person that he's writing to.
Excellent. Authority. So someone with greater authority than the author has greater authority than the recipient.
My first thought is that it's father to his son.
Like a
Fa-
teacher.
Father to a son, a teacher. Excellent. Any other reactions? I'm looking for 3. Well, some of those answers are good. I'm looking for 3 more, possibly 2 or 3 more.
Holy man.
A holy man. Well, what?
Well,
There's one sort of obvious answer, and that what's the title that the author gives to himself in the text?
elder.
The elder. Right. So that's one kind of obvious answer is the elder. The other one, another one I'm looking for is kind of a trick question. What genre is this document?
A letter.
A letter. Yeah. And now, are there any English majors here? I don't know if correspondence technically is a genre or not, but I'll call it a genre for the sake of the conversation. We've been assuming that the genre is correspondence. Could it be something different? I'm thinking something really different. Anyone? Begins with an F.
Fiction.
Yep. Could it be fiction? And then who would the author be?
Insufficient data.
Right. we wouldn't know. It would be the anonymous author of a piece of fiction in which the elder is a character. All right, so those are two. That's good. Those are a good group of answers. I'm gonna. The reason I brought up the fiction scenario is because it's going to become more important in a few weeks. But it's important to remember, and I'll be harping on this a little bit, that almost anything can be fiction. I mean, almost any type of document could be a fictional form of that document. Something that looks like correspondence could be fictional correspondence. There could be a fictional diary. There could be, if you watch Star Trek, there can be fictional engineering instructions. There's almost any fiction because it's fiction, can replicate almost any other form of almost any other type of genre, maybe even every type of genre. So that's basically what I was looking for there. There's another something we'll go back to with this a little bit down the road. To where did the author write it?
Bronze Age Palestine.
Bronze Age Palestine. That's a good guess. It doesn't say. So that the answer on that is insufficient data. For those who are paid the bigger bucks than me, I'm not paid any bucks, so anyways. For those who are paid the big bucks and are the scholars and who study texts like these, they can start to glean little things, little subtleties in these sorts of documents that can give some help with location. Yeah.
The brethren and Gentiles and such leads me to think Palestine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's probably We'll go back to that question, but for now, we don't know for certain. And it certainly doesn't say so in so many words. Who is the intended recipient? Gaius, right? That's an easy one. Where was the recipient? Elsewhere. That's a good answer. And the answer there is we don't know. It doesn't say in the text explicitly. 5. When was it written?
80, 60 to 80, 90.
80.
Huh? No, because this is in the New Testament. So.
Let's step back on the dating question for a moment or so.
It was written after something occurred, because apparently the guy Diogenes is saying some things about that author, the author they agree with, so it was written after a conflict had taken place.
Excellent. No, that's an excellent answer. It's written in the immediate, or in the more or less immediate aftermath of some sort of falling out between the elder and Diotrephes. Excellent. In terms of a date, the text just doesn't say. There will be additional information that may become available to us down the road, but for now, we'll just say we don't know. On the dating issue, though, what's the easiest way to date a text? This is a obvious question, but I just want someone to say it.
The original copy, carbon 14 works best. If you don't, then you just kind of have to guess based on what knowledge you have of the history and the time period.
Right. The historical context. Obviously, the most direct way is to look at the date. Now, we're kind of spoiled in that we live in a place and time that tends to date texts. Other places and times didn't. And then if you're looking at a particular, if there are other famous historical events or circumstances that are referenced in the document, then you have, that could help with the dating. And people who are paid the big bucks might be able to glean something out of this. But for our purposes, we'll just say The date is not known at this point. How was it delivered? I want to focus on this one a little bit.
Probably on foot.
On foot? All right.
That was actually kind of common back then.
Anything more specific than that?
Papyrus?
Huh?
Papyrus?
I'm not thinking so much. That's a good point. I'm not so much thinking of the document, but the delivery of the document. Any other thoughts? This is not conclusive at all, but it could be a clue. Let me direct you to the last sentence of that. The sentence that begins, "Beloved, do not imitate." There's the final sentence reads, "Demetrius has received a good testimony from everyone and from the truth itself. And we add our testimony, and you know that our testimony is true." Does that help with anything?
Just a reminder.
I'm sorry?
Is it kind of a reminder? Each kind of remind them, or kind of exhorting them to remember what they already know. So kind of almost like a teacher delivers something to students.
It's reminding them. So it serves as a reminder of the fact that Demetrius is a good guy. All right. Anything else?
Oral transmission? Like it was said once and then somebody eventually wrote it down? Like that's
That this is an attempt to.
because he's like, this guy was trustworthy, we're trustworthy, so trust me, this is true.
Or it says, "I had many things to write to you, but I'm not willing to write them to you with pen and ink. I hope to see you face to face."
So it could be that this text could be. It was originally an oral communication,
Yeah,
and then eventually it gets codified
yeah.
down the road. All right. Let's think about that. I won't spend too much more time on this. There's a reading, and this is not a consensus point, it's not obvious, but there's a possibility that sentence could be read that sentence is functioning as a letter of recommendation. That Demetrius is carrying the letter, and upon arrival, Gaius is receiving it, and he may not know Demetrius, but he knows the elder. And so it's functioning as a letter of recommendation. Not those fake letters of recommendation that we do today. Those, he sat in the front row and turned in his homework on time, so hire him for a job that I don't know anything about. Not those, but the real type where the old school letters of recommendation where you would be traveling from one place to another and a mutual friend was on the other side, and so you'd carry a letter of recommendation establishing your identity. With the mutual friend. So that could be what this is. It could also be that it's just a reference, as you were saying, it could just be a reminder that the elder is wanting to bring to Gaius' attention, again, that Demetrius is one of the good guys. Just could be a general reminder of that. That sounds good. Could possibly go either way. 7. All right, we can go over this one pretty quickly. Was the deliverer carrying anything else from the author to the recipient?
If he was, it makes no reference to it in the text.
Right. This is a good question always to ask, because sometimes when there's a document, particularly when you're talking about correspondence, there'll be other objects in transit that are important to the letter, that are referenced in the letter. In this case, there's no reference to anything like that. 8. What is its purpose? And if we were studying this text in a lot more detail, this would be the central question we'd be asking, and we'd probably spend the whole time on it. We'll just spend a couple minutes on it here, but I just wanted to get a couple reactions to this one. And we did hear a couple good answers to that already from other questions. One was that this is relating to a dispute that had arisen between the elder and Diotrephes. Anything else? What's the what's the fundamental topic of the letter? This is sort of hard.
The one who does good is of God, the one who does evil has not seen God.
Yeah, there's this general moral theological statement there in that sort of the first sentence of that final big paragraph. Do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. The one who does good is of God. The one who does evil has not seen God. Does that line remind anyone of anything? Anything specific? No, it's okay. It's okay if it doesn't.
Fear no evil, see no evil.
Fear no evil, see no evil.
That's what comes to mind.
Well, it's a note from Scotsman fallacy. Just,
Okay.
It just
So-
it says, whoever does bad isn't one of us.
Right.
Whoever does
What do you
is.
think of?
Yeah, that's a good. No, that's a really good point. That's a really good point.
There's no flip side to that. Since they're one of us, they can only do good.
Yeah, that's kind of the point.
Or therefore, whatever they do must be good.
Any other thoughts? All right. I'll just say quickly. I think most scholars that I've surveyed on this would look at this and say that at a fundamental level, this is the topic of this letter is missionary work, and you can see that and it's confusing because there's a lot of people traveling to different places. There's probably 3 different locations being discussed here. There's where the elder is, there's where Gaius is, and then there's where Diotrephes is. And there are people going back and forth, and it's hard to figure out what's going on. But there's been some sort of a blow-up over, it's either missionaries or missionary routes or the accommodations that missionaries were receiving, or the appointment of the missionaries. There's something fell apart in missionary activity as missionaries were moving between these places that caused the elder to get mad at Diotrephes. And how mad is he? He's pretty mad. I mean, he says, how does he introduce Diotrephes? He's someone who loves to be first among them, and then it kind of goes downhill from there. So
The paragraph after that seems to suggest that don't be like this guy. He's evil.
okay, so that's another interesting point. So when he says, "Do not imitate what is evil, but what is good," is he saying there?
It sounds like he's sort of obliquely suggesting that this fellow is evil.
Yeah. All right, cool. Okay, 9, and this is getting more into the material that was covered in the written exercise. What is the authority relationship between the author and recipient? This was essentially covered pretty well already, but if we could sum it up.
I still think it's a father.
Father to son. All right, that's an interesting reading. But it's at least the author is expressing a level of authority over the recipient.
It seems like someone who has it good with like God, just kind of knows what God wants and what he thinks about stuff.
It's an elder minister writing his letter to one of his understudies.
Okay, so Gaius is functioning as sort of a disciple type of figure in the letter, possibly.
Yes.
All right. Cool. Those are all good answers, and they all tie into what was the fundamental point of what I was getting at in the written exercise, which was that it is an authority to subordinate type of document. And for instance, he refers to the associates of Gaius up front. He refers to them as my children and so forth. All right, now 10. This is the other big point that I want to focus on. Is it a complete or partial communication? And I want to linger on this for a few minutes because this is a really big deal, I think, for it's a big deal for what we're going to be talking about later on in the discussion. In the written exercise, I sort of talk about this concept of complete communication and partial communication. Does anyone want to say anything about that?
It honestly seems pretty complete to me. There's a greeting of subject matter and then a goodbye.
It's a full document.
It seems
Yeah. And that's definitely true. It is definitely a full, complete document. Let me run by a couple. Let me throw out two scenarios that are the two opposite extremes of what I'm talking about. What if you were assigned a 5-page paper and you turned in to your professor a paragraph, and at the end of the paragraph you say, I think it would be more convenient for both of us. I'll just stop by your office later this week and I'll just tell you the information. It'd be simpler for both of us. What would happen if you did that?
Depends on the professor.
It depends on the professor.
Any
Yeah.
class I've ever taken, you get an F.
You'd get an F.
Most of my teachers would be cool with it. Don't bash my teacher.
I know the purpose of that document.
Yeah.
Because it
Yeah.
wants to see your writing ability to some extent.
Mhm.
Yeah, rather than just what you know.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of very specific purpose.
So the assignment may have, I guess it may have the function of two things. One is to convey that you know the information, but also it's to test your ability to coherently put it all into one place. That's what when I'm talking about a complete document, that's what I'm talking about. It is a document where the reader is looking for, and for that matter, what a third party who just stumbles onto the document would receive, is that the totality of what you're trying to communicate is there. Now, partial communication. All right, here's some partial communication. Someone sends a quick message. When do you want me to pick you up? And the person replies, how about 6:30? Now, is that
AM, PM.
6:30 p.m.? Let's say that. That's what I'm talking about partial communication, and that it lacks any sort of context. But it's appropriate for the circumstances because it's for the recipient. The recipient understands what's
the missing information already.
right, and that's the key. The recipient already has the other information, and it would be inappropriate in that context to, when asked, "When do you want me to pick you up?" to respond with a complete communication, where you go into why you're going where you're going and why you picked that person to pick you up and whether you're going to do it in the future and the history of your picking each other up. I mean, it would be remarkably inappropriate under the circumstances to reply with a statement like that. I mean, all this is sort of obvious, but I want to bring those two categories of document into the conversation. And then in that context, what would we say this text is?
As in complete or partial?
Yeah.
Complete.
You'd say it's complete?
Yes.
Other thoughts? Someone read a line a few minutes ago that does add some more insight into this question.
Well, it's partial because in the last paragraph it says, I have many more things to write to you, but I'm not going to.
Right.
Well, the fact that he says I'm not going to seems to complete at least the thought.
Oh,
We'll get to it at a later date.
Does he tell you what evil is?
I'm sorry?
Does he tell you what evil is?
That's a good point. He rather summarily just says good and evil. And so probably Gaius already has some sense of what he means by that. Probably. Andrew's point is a good one there, and it's a really important line in the text. I am not willing to write to you. I'm not. I have many more things to write to you, but I'm not willing to write them to you with pen and ink. So there's more. It is a complete. It's a complete document, and it's serving its complete purpose. Yes, it is formal.
Informational standpoint, it's not.
Right. It is a complete communication physically, but there's other components of this communication. I would say that there are 3 possible channels of communication between Gaius, or from the elder to Gaius, that are identified in this document, and the letter itself is one of them. What are the other 2?
To me, it's face-to-face and through Demetrius.
Excellent. That was good. That was good. Yeah, it's that there is the letter itself, you have this planned conversation later that the elder wants to have face-to-face with Gaius, and then third, there is the person who's conveying the document could also have more communication orally, because, and if we go with the theory that it's Demetrius who's carrying the letter, and it could be someone else, but if it was Demetrius, it's quite possible that Demetrius doesn't just show up and say, here's the letter. It may be he has been entrusted with a great deal of oral communication from the elder
And
too.
if they're afraid of it being intercepted in some way, they might give the important information to Demetrius, and that might be what he says, what he means by doesn't want to write it in pen and paper. That's sort of a way of saying that he could have given the information to Demetrius instead of.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's a very good
Demetrius
point.
gets intercepted somewhere, presumably killed.
Yeah.
All they have is this letter with nothing really substantial.
That's. I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's a big point. Is the possibility of interception could be is why the elder is making this such a short letter, not wanting to write more and saying he doesn't want to write more. And then also it could be it's safer to convey it orally through Demetrius than in writing.
Yeah, I'm not gonna. Not willing to write them to you with pen and ink. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah. That's a really good point.
Does it
Yeah.
really make sense? I mean, I wasn't really listening too much. If you said it, I apologize. But I have many things to write to you, but I'm not willing to write it in an ink. How do you, in this time period, how do you write something without pen and ink? I mean, do
It
you
just means he wants to talk.
It could be a metaphor.
so is it like a translation error?
Or it could just be a metaphor.
I mean, I guess you could do that.
So could you say that?
So I was wondering, is that a translation thing? Did you lose some of the actual message in translation? Because whoever translates it is going to have their own subjective views of what is this, what is that, in their scripture in English.
So you're thinking in that sense he may be talking about the possibility of other written communication that does not involve pen and ink?
No, I was just taking it to an extreme, just
Okay.
being stupid, but
In my
Well, that's all right.
In my mind, it's sort of like I'd rather not say this over the phone. Kind of.
right.
It's
Yeah,
not-
no, I definitely agree with that. Yeah, I can see that. It's like I want to meet you in person, but I was wondering, like the many things to write to you, does that go down to a translation, or you think he actually meant write to you? Is what I was kind of
There
curious
are many
about.
things I want you to know, but
No, I
I don't see why it couldn't be translation.
it couldn't be one.
I don't see why that couldn't be a possibility.
Just an idea.
It seems a little odd. It's like that.
So that's something to.
we can, and as I promised last time, if we ever get caught up on a particular phrase where there is a translation issue, we can always, I can look into it afterwards and get a more detailed. But I think in the general, would people agree that the general point of that line is, at very least, there's more communication, and that he has some sort of preference for oral communication over written communication for whatever reason, possibly because of the interception issue.
If the apostrophes as bad a fellow as he seems to suggest, that's probably not how way to go.
So that's another point. So it's the source of the interception could be diatrophies. Yeah. Excellent. What? That was very good. There was, I think. Let me just check. I think there was one other. I'll just mention this briefly. Given, and we kind of touched on this, given the mechanics of writing a long time ago, it could also be a statement of convenience to some extent. That he's saying, I just don't want to take the time.
Writing at that time was a very labor-intensive
Right.
occupation.
Right. Okay. 11. What happened to it later? What happened to the letter after? There's one thing we know about the aftermath of the delivery of this letter. Actually, let me.
It survived.
It survived.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. That's.
May not have made it to intended recipient, but it
At least
get
long enough to
destroyed.
be copied.
Yes. No, that's very good. That's something people can sometimes gloss over. Is when a document comes down to us in history, that does in and of itself say something about that document. For some reason, this text did survive. And I'll leave this as sort of a final bonus question. It kind of goes along with this, but it's something to think about as we go forward. There's not going to be an answer available here, but something to think about. Is our copy descended from the sent or retained text? Meaning,
Did he get the letter?
well, meaning, so far we've only been talking about a letter being sent. What if the elder writes a letter, he writes a copy of the letter, keeps a copy, sends the other one? Which of those two are we looking at? There is no answer, but it's something to think about going forward.
Or this letter may have never been sent to the community.
That's true as well. It could have never been sent. All right, so that was good. So that's the exercise. I'll just conclude with one little point. Well, actually, a couple of points as we wrap this up. First of all, I brought up the issue of fiction at first because it's important to always consider the possibility that a text is fiction. I'll just say, for the sake of simplicity, that historians that I've surveyed all agree that it's not fiction, that this is a real, that the actual genre of this text is correspondence, and that it was a letter that was sent. That would be a consensus point among scholars, and I will be largely confining my comments to consensus points among scholars as we go forward. So I'm comfortable saying that as a consensus point, this was a real letter. Why did I pick this document? Anyone? This document is what is called a Johannine text, which is a sort of fancy way of saying that it is, and I use these words carefully, it is historically associated with, in some sense, associated with John, son of Zebedee. And who is John, son of Zebedee? Anyone? Well, there are two main things to to say about John, son of Zebedee, up front. First, he is the John. He is, other than John the Baptist, all those names and streets and buildings and schools that are named John or Juan or Johannes or whatever, are all named after John, son of Zebedee, or possibly John the Baptist, or someone who is named after him, or someone who is named after someone who is named after him. But he is the origin of that name. The second thing to know about him is that there's very little consensus on him. People are going to disagree about pretty much everything about him. There's one basic fact that pretty much all scholars that have studied him would agree on, and that is what?
That he existed.
Yes, that's good. Yeah, that he did exist, and one other thing.
His name was John.
And his name was John. The base. Yeah, the thing that he's famous for is that he's someone who knew Jesus. And exactly what that means is itself part of the controversy as a friend, as a follower, as a financier, as a traveling companion, maybe some combination of those things. But if you look at all of the earliest texts that talk about Jesus, John, son of Zebedee, is... Hello?
Is this off of Gotham Razors? Yeah?
Yeah.
I was like, oh no. Not exactly.
He is, in all the earliest texts that talk about Jesus, Jesus is regularly depicted with John, son of Zebedee, in one form or another, for one reason or another. Jesus is also generally depicted as having interactions with the Zebedee family in general. They're different members of that family. So as a basic point, they knew each other. And he is going to, John, son of Zebedee, is a figure who's going to be coming up for various reasons again in future, not in nearly as much detail, but we'll be noticing him again in the future. So that means that this text is what is today often referred to as the third letter of John, or third John, or the third epistle of John, or the third epistle of St. John. It takes various labels, but it has been labeled as such, and so it is a scriptural text. It is, and this is one of the remarkable things about this document, as we look at it, start from its beginning, to the point that it really is. I mean, I haven't gone out and counted everything, but it's probably safe to say that this is probably one of the top 100 most widely read, distributed, translated documents in the history of the world. It's a remarkable statement. People have died trying to get this thing distributed out. People have sacrificed their lives for the distribution of this document, and it is very widely read. And that's the power of the phenomenon of Scripture, which is what we are about to discuss, is that a text can really take off. And as we look, and as I did on purpose, I wanted us to immerse ourselves just in the original document itself, but now we can look back and see where it's gone since then. And it's remarkable, and we're about to talk about why that's remarkable and how that's remarkable and so forth. Any thoughts, comments so far?
So it is generally agreed upon that he did exist and is the author of this letter?
John, son of Zebedee, certainly existed. And we'll be looking at some more evidence of that. For other reasons, we're going to be doing some stuff that happens to be really good evidence for that general proposition that he existed. But the question is a good one. Did he write the letter? Is he the elder in the text? that is something, let's think about that and revisit that later down the road. It is, when I said it's a Johannine text, this document, for whatever reason, is historically associated with him. Does that mean he was the author? I want to keep that question open for the time being. Other thoughts?
Do we know
Question?
what his real name was? Because I'm assuming that if he lived in, the Middle East, several centuries ago, his name wasn't actually John.
That's the English translation of the word. It's a Hebrew word. And I forget exactly. Phonetically, I forget exactly how you would put it in English. It's a little different from John, but that John, Juan, Johannes, those body of names that's where that all comes from. Other comments before we proceed? All right. So, what I promised last time is that we were going to focus on 4 documents, if time permitting, and we'll see how many we get to. We don't need to get to all of them. What we're now going to look at is a narrow question, and we can go, if people want to go beyond the question, that's fine. But we're going to get anchored to some extent in this one question. That is, what is when you look at a scriptural text, like what we've just looked at in some detail, what does it mean to believe that it's a scriptural text? And what does it mean to reject it as a scriptural text? What is the level of authority that the document is giving to itself, that if you believed it was a scriptural text, you'd be assigning to it? And if you rejected it as a scriptural text, you would not be assigning to it. Is that kind? The question is not so much today, are these texts we're about to look at worthy of reverence or not? But what is being asked of us in asking that question? Does that kind of make sense? A little bit? Okay, we got a couple affirmative nods. That's good. I'm going to start off with the easiest one. And as I said last time, the New Testament is the case study for really all, well, not all. For several of the sessions, the New Testament is the case study of whatever we're going to be talking about. So I've picked 4 New Testament texts. I'm starting with the one that is probably, I guess it's probably safe to say that, at least to me, that what we're about to look at is the strongest statement of authority of any New Testament text. The Apocalypse of John, which today is sometimes called the Book of Revelation, opens as follows. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show to his bondservants the things which must soon take place. And he sent and communicated it by his angel to his bondservant John, who testified to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, even to all that he saw. Blessed is he who reads and those who hear the words of the prophecy and hear the things which are written in it, for the time is near. So my first just basic question I want us to talk about is when you pick up a text like this and you read it and it opens like that, what are you being asked to do? And what's your reaction to that?
Being asked to take the text at its word.
All right. You're being asked to take the text at its word. All right. And obey.
Well, I would say the problem with obey is this doesn't really give any command unless I'm missing something.
It's just like
Well, it gives commands after, especially in the first paragraph.
To me, it's more a linear.
Oh, it goes on to-
It's going to listen up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey guys, pay attention to this.
Yeah, and actually, let me make a brief point. It's a good point that this was raised. I'm sort of breaking a fundamental rule of textual studies, which that I'm introducing a portion of a text without giving everyone a full opportunity to review the entire thing, which is a no-no. But just in the interest of time, we just sort of have to, and I'll be doing that in future handouts. I'll be referring to some things, and so I sort of in doing so give myself the ability to refer to them. I know that's kind of cheating, but in the interest of time, I thought this was the best way to do it. Do people take this sort of statement seriously? Not seriously?
Well, a lot of people do.
Oh, I'm asking you specifically. Yeah. No.
Not at all.
Not really.
No.
I take it seriously in that there are people who take it seriously.
Right.
But to me personally, not really.
Well, the person who wrote it is obviously very serious.
Yeah.
Right.
Or at least trying to appear.
When you have that claim dismissal legitimacy to your argument, then it's probably a big argument. I see a lot of Bibles that claim that this is the word of God, you must read it, but then they start telling these mystical stories.
Mm-hmm. Other thoughts? I don't mean to exclude the people in the back. I'm sort of nearsighted a bit in my. I'm sort of nearsighted a bit in who I'm looking at. But.
So much.
Oh, was that a problem?
I didn't realize it till you shut it off.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
We have a feedback issue.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that. So some people are saying that they don't take something like this seriously.
What's a bond servant?
Slave.
Is it, that's like you're indebted to them for life or whatever?
It seems to me
Yeah.
a translation thing. I would think, just my own speculation, is that it probably doesn't translate straight from the original. But
It's a long-term
yeah.
long-term binding commitment to another person to serve them.
Deal with the Hebrew former covenant, that sort of thing.
Voluntary?
A bond servant was not just a slave. You could buy your own freedom if you got enough money.
There were ways to get out of the bond servitude. It wasn't like slaves like of the American slaves back in the 19th century, where you really couldn't get out of it.
Right.
Talk about being a bondservant to Jesus.
Yeah, is this saying Jesus owned slaves?
Yeah.
Somebody owed money, and it's
In the
them.
Bible, all of us.
I'm not sure slave would be quite right.
Yeah, because your serving could be voluntary.
Yeah.
It may not be referring to a literal indentured servant of the man Jesus Christ.
Well, there's an interesting
So
symbolism
you just
because
spend money.
in the Bible it refers to being a slave to sin,
Mhm.
and here they're playing on that and turning it around and saying being a slave to Christ.
And all really.
So there's lots of
Yeah.
things in the
Yeah, it's definitely a statement of of committed subordination to the other, and you're right. It's important to not think of slavery worldwide and through history as taking the same form as it did in 19th century America, but the general idea of that dedication to another individual is there. Other thoughts?
It makes me want to do an experiment, like okay, heed the things which are written in it, and then it will be blessed. Like if in terms of trying to verify if the story is true, he's kind of giving me something cause
Mhm.
effect. Like if I heed the things, I will be blessed.
Well, and then you've got a problem with the word blessing. I mean, is that in the here and now or in the hereafter? And where you will
That's problems.
That's
So-
where they get you.
So take a group of people, have them read it. Take another group of people, have them not read it, and then see the relative
Well, they'd have to
degrees of
heed
blessed.
it. If they didn't heed it, then
Right, and heed.
I think that's interesting finish to it, for the time is near.
So, either
Mhm.
way.
That's kind of ominous,
Yeah.
we're watching.
Other thoughts?
I noticed that he didn't say, like, he said, Jesus Christ, communicated this to John, who, but it doesn't say, like, he communicated it to me, who is,
Mhm.
John, and it just says John as though it's like this third person and doesn't actually specifically say that the person writing it is John,
Yeah.
or is writing it down on behalf of John, like who dictated it, or if it's just like, kind of like, yeah, Jesus Christ told this to John, but now it's been
Well,
a while before I am like a separate person who's written this down.
it seems
Yeah,
to be
sorry.
going farther than that. God told Jesus, who told his angel, who told John.
Who then told me, who's
Yeah,
now
who
writing
then
it down.
told me, and now I'm writing it down.
Yeah. That's what it seems like is happening here.
Those are really good thoughts. It does not say by his angel to me, his servant, his bondservant John. It just says to his bondservant John, and that is written in the third person, which may well have some significance on the.
The fact that it's in the third person seems to suggest that it was not, in fact, John who wrote it.
So it goes, the revelation under that hypothesis goes from God to Jesus, to the angel, to John,
some
to the
third
author.
guy. Yeah.
I mean, I can understand why somebody would want to write in third person, but I feel like in the beginning, when you're kind of introducing what this is and what it's talking about and where you got this information from, it would be relevant to include whether or not, it would be relevant to include if you are John, if that is in fact the case.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe write the rest
Well,
of
it
it in
does say
third
a
person.
couple of John. Yeah, but that seems to suggest John is involved.
That is not.
Well, it's
That's its label.
Oh.
Those words, and we'll
Does
It's
it also-
attributed to-
go back there. Yeah, I'm sorry.
does it also kind of mean that supposedly the angel, I guess, comes to John and he's all like, look, Jesus told me, or God told Jesus to tell me to tell you, da da da. Otherwise, how would they know that was the path that the message took?
That the angel had to tell John that previous change. Yeah.
I think if we could say it was written third person, then we could conclude that it was written later, like almost all of these texts in the Bible.
Other thoughts? All right.
It also suggests that we don't have to read farther to see the identify the author later on. It may just be kind of an introduction thing
Yeah.
to the entire book or whatever.
I'll stipulate. So what can I stipulate to? There's not an additional author discussed by name later on. I'll just say that. But yeah, it does make you want to look further to see what happens later on in the text. Let's go to the next one. And this, I really am kind of cheating on the next one because I'm about to just dump this really so hopefully, I think some people are already familiar with what you're about to see, and that's good. For those who aren't, I do sort of apologize because it's going to be kind of quite a bit all at once. We're about to look at the first letter to Corinth, which is which I'll just say another point of scholarly consensus is that this is also a real letter and that Paul wrote it. Or had it, Paul and perhaps an assistant, actually almost certainly an assistant working with Paul wrote it. And this is a section in the middle of what today we have as the letter, where there's a chunk where he talks about marriage and sexual ethics, and people have studied this document. It's a huge document. It covers a ton of material. Even this little portion covers a ton of material, and it goes just way beyond what we're talking about today. But I want to bring out, and bear in mind the previous passage we just read when we look at this. So in this section, he's talking, well, I'll just read it. But to the married I give instructions, not I, but the Lord, that the wife should not leave her husband, but if she does leave, she must remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband, and that the husband should not divorce his wife. But to the rest I say, not the Lord, that if any brother has a wife who is an unbeliever and she consents to live with him, he must not divorce her. And a woman who has an unbelieving husband and he consents to live with her should not send her husband away. Remember the basic question here, what are you being asked? What are you accepting or rejecting by accepting or rejecting this?
Well, the way he says it, basically, the first one he says to be like the law, and the second one's just an opinion of his. Because there's when he says, the Lord said this.
Yeah.
And the second one's like, well, but I think you should. The second one.
Which is a pretty bold statement. Yeah.
I mean, he's taking it from what the Lord said, he's taking it from the preceding paragraph and trying to apply it to people who are single based on what he studied that the Lord has said, and seeing if he could apply that same kind of logic to a different group of people.
So it's sort of the second, are you saying the second paragraph is sort of a precedent drawn from the first paragraph?
All I can think about this whole time is what gives him the right to say, I didn't say this, but the Lord says it. Like, I just keep thinking, what are your credentials again? Like, that's all I can think about.
Well, he studied the other preceding text because he was first a scholar of the law, so he knew all the 666 Torah laws. So he had that authority as a teacher outside of.
No, I mean, even back there, like, there's really, I just keep thinking what evidence is there that even that came, like, someone told someone something, who told someone something, who told someone, it's not.
Why would he believe it, right?
Yeah,
he believes that the Lord thinks that you shouldn't get divorced. What does he mean, you think, by reconcile to her husband? Like, if she does leave, then you can't get married and you gotta let him beat you on a regular basis? Like,
it has to do with their marriage laws. There are like three things, Jewish men, women. If you want to leave, you had to get a writ of divorce. You didn't get a writ of divorce, you could remarry legally in the Jewish community. But if you did get that, you could remarry.
You can remarry, just not until the priestly order.
I found it interesting because right at the top we're having a direct order from authority, and then the author goes and writes in and puts his own little idea. It almost seems like he's thinking, well, people reading this, they'll be in the mindset of, okay, all this, and then it's almost kind of a snake oil,
Maybe sort of
squeeze
kind
it
of
in.
riding on the
Yeah.
horse tail.
I'll change the world on my own,
So it's sort of that second statement is sort of a tack on to the, or just a piggyback onto
Well,
the.
I'm curious about
That's interesting.
married here. It says, but to the married I give instructions, but then at the bottom it says to the rest, but then still mentions a wife.
Yes.
That's curious. Can someone be a wife without being married?
And I don't want to get too much into the mechanics of what he's actually trying to say here, in terms of the ethics, the ethical system he's putting forward, because it would require there's stuff that goes before and after that informs that quite a bit. I mean, basically what I would say, just, and I think I'm on safe territory, is he's saying, actually before I go there, let me ask one more question, then hopefully that'll help. Paul, who's someone we'll be looking at some more in the future, what just the basic summary of what was he?
Paul?
Yeah.
Wasn't he a disciple of Christ?
What was that?
An apostle.
Yeah.
He was the first person to write it, wasn't he? It wasn't the original, he didn't write the gospel. He was the one who spoke of Jesus Christ. He didn't speak of Jesus Christ as being,
Paul was Saul, so he was killing Christians.
He was the guy who was walking around and had the vision of Jesus.
Yeah.
I was blind for
yeah.
For our sorry.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I could be completely misinformed on this. I'm not. But you know, I thought he was the one who first spoke, and he didn't. I mean, he didn't speak of the virgin birth, the life of Jesus. He didn't speak of the death and resurrection, and the visions of him coming. But you know, I don't know. I obviously need to research more since I'm getting lost in my own part here. But I thought he was though. You know, he first spoke of Jesus. And just sort of got that whole thing going. But
Paul has. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
2 or 3 years after his after he had the vision on the road to Damascus, before he even came to other Christians. So Paul was a latecomer into the whole message. John was one of the earliest ones, as I understand it.
Christianity existed as an organized religion before St. Paul came around.
He was trying to exterminate all. He was first like a great. Yeah, he was the one who everyone was like afraid of. And then he did a 180.
yeah.
For our purposes, and those are all good comments. For our purposes, and in session 6, we're actually going to, which will be sort of the climax of what we're doing, we're going to look at Paul and what he talks about himself in quite a bit of detail. This is all sort of just a precursor to that. For our purposes, there are a couple things that and I'm standing on fairly firm scholarly consensus when I say this. The two things that matter about Paul for these purposes is, one, he believed that he saw Jesus alive after he had died. Now, what that means, different people can have different views. But he believed he had this experience, and as a result was commissioned by God to help form the church. He most likely, most scholars would say he did not know Jesus in his own lifetime. They may have never met.
In Paul's lifetime or Jesus' lifetime?
Well, the prior to Jesus' death, they never met. It's quite possible. But Paul had this experience of thinking he'd seen him alive after he died.
Yeah, that was good.
And then the second is that Paul knew people who knew Jesus. We're going to look in session 6, there's going to be an account of Paul's where he has a meeting with John, son of Zebedee. So these four guys kind of get together in a room. It's John, son of Zebedee, Simon Peter, who's another associate of Jesus', and then one of Jesus' brothers, and Paul. Get in a room and talk about some stuff. So he had interaction with people who knew Jesus during Jesus' earth lifetime, and then he thought he saw him alive after he had died. Based on that, this isn't a huge point for what we're talking about, but based on that, when he says, "Not I, but the Lord," what specifically does he mean by that? I give instructions, not I, but the Lord.
My first thought is Jesus.
Yes.
He was talking about.
I think we can assume for the sake that he's referring to
Is
Jesus.
God, if I remember correctly, God isn't typically referred to as the Lord. I don't know. It's been a long time.
Mm-hmm. The point, and we can move on from this. The point is that could, when he says, not I, but the Lord, he could be referring to a revelation. And in addition to seeing Jesus, he also believed he had revelations, additional revelations later on in his life. So it's possible that this could be a reference to him having a revelation of Jesus saying this to him. It could also mean that through his interaction with Jesus' friends and relatives, that he was aware that Jesus had taken this position in his teachings in his lifetime. Which does, and this does correspond, there's some evidence, which we don't really need to get into, there's some evidence to indicate that Jesus did in fact take a public, pretty strong anti-divorce position in his lifetime. And so that this would kind of match up with that. Let's move on.
I'm curious,
yeah.
Because what constitutes a wife?
So when you're married to.
Well, but the first one is to married people, right?
Right.
The second one is to non-married people, but it still refers to a brother having a wife.
It's the second section. I think what it's saying here is that the first statement is basically a general anti-divorce statement, where he says, "Not I, but the Lord," and then he says, "I say, not the Lord."
Okay.
And the question he's asking in that section is, if there's a situation in which, because he's part of a new religious movement, which means that there are a lot of new people, which means that there are a lot of circumstances in which you have a married couple and one of them joins and the other doesn't. In that circumstance, if the member is in a position where the non-member spouse is fine staying in the marriage, even though the member spouse joined, should the member spouse be content to stay married to the non-member? Does the problem of being married to a non-member supersede this preceding instruction?
If there are no other problems, don't worry about it.
Yeah, he seems to be saying, yeah, if the non-member is fine,
the
then
key is no divorce, not both.
Right.
So isn't there a part, I don't know where in the Bible it is, that says, do not be unevenly yoked through marriage?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean,
I've heard also in a hunting club, I heard a caller who said, if you're a woman and you're with an atheist, then you should give him up and find a Christian.
yeah, like I've heard a lot. I don't know, that's kind of what I got from the unevenly yoked passage. I don't remember where it is, but
I feel like there may be a difference between like being a believer and getting married to someone who isn't, versus like being married and being two unbelievers and then one of them
I get what you're saying.
starting to believe. Like I mean, I think generally it's frowned upon for someone who's a believer to marry someone who's not a believer. But if you become a believer after you're married, then I think what he's saying is it
Basically, what he's saying is no divorce.
Yeah, the key about this is no divorce. Divorce is bad.
For any reason. Always.
let's move on to, when we skip a little bit of material and we move on to the next section here. And we can go into what he's actually saying here, but this is even more complicated than the preceding section. But he starts off by saying, I have no command of the Lord, but I give an opinion as one who by the mercy of the Lord is trustworthy. And then he goes on to give some instructions. And basically what he's saying here is he says, it's in the interest of time, I won't even get into it. But if we focus in the first sentence there, I have no command of the Lord, but I give an opinion as one who by the mercy of the Lord is trustworthy. So the question, what is someone saying when they reject or accept this?
Basically saying that he's full of bullshit.
Okay, expound a bit more.
Well, he's saying that that the Lord has called him trustworthy, and if I reject it, I'm saying, no, he didn't. You're lying to me.
An interesting aspect is that if he had said, the Lord said this, there would be no discussion right now.
he's
Mhm.
honest enough to say, the Lord has told me this and the Lord has not told me this. If he was truly trying to deceive people, I think he's doing a very poor job of it.
That's what I was
Or
gonna
very
say, is like, if he really wanted people to take what he's saying seriously, he could have just said, you know, the Lord told me all of this. So I feel like either he honestly thinks that the Lord told him some things, and that these things are his opinion, and that those are like two separate areas, or that there's someone else who would know, like, who would be able to call him out if he deliberately lied and said, the Lord told me all of this. So I feel like either he's being honest to what he thinks is the truth, or there's someone else.
Either wrong or sincerely wrong, or right.
Yeah. Or there's someone else who could, like, verify it. Or
Doesn't
just
want to think that he's infallible, but, you know, him and God are pretty close, you know, they're buddy-buddy, so
Well, the Lord's
he's
talking to me.
probably a good authority. He's like, you know, maybe I'm wrong, but, you know, me and God got it going on, so.
It's false claim. Because that's what he gets sued.
So it's sort of is what you're saying. It sort of falls somewhere between. It's not this is God saying it, and it's not. There's just some opinions. He's putting it somewhere between those two. Okay.
He's effectively claiming God's authority by saying that God says he's trustworthy.
He's implying.
Okay.
Yeah, he's not. He's being honest.
What else could that possibly
In a sense,
mean?
implying his honesty. Yes, he is heavily implying that you should take my word for it. Is hang out with Jesus.
It's almost kind of like, well, if God trusts me, you should trust me too. Who are you to argue with him? I kind of see it as that.
But God did blind him after he had a bunch of Christians, so.
Then how in the world could he write this?
All right. So, on that note, that was good. So I hope that gives some flavor of this idea of statements of authority when you come to a text, the statement of authority that the author is expressing to you, and then the question for everyone individually is how they take that in any given circumstance based on what the author is saying. I'm gonna skip the letter to Philemon, which is a really interesting. Can anyone just say real quickly what that document is about? Okay, it's a very interesting document. It's very short, and it's about, and scholars also see it as a real letter. It's a letter that Paul wrote between there's Paul and two other people. One is it's a slave and a master, and it's Paul talking about trying to mediate a reconciliation of their relationship. And he goes into all sorts of stuff about his authority over the master and his relationship with the servant. It's very thought-provoking when it comes to these issues. I'll conclude just by throwing out this little passage, which we don't need to talk about, but I thought it's a nice puzzle to end with. This is the letter to Colossae. At the end, the author. The account and this is a text that may be fiction, where scholars are divided on whether or not this is a piece of fiction that looks like a piece of correspondence or actual correspondence. But setting that aside for the moment, the context of the document is that there's this letter, it's written. There are two different locations, Laodicea and Colossae, which are near each other. And presumably the author is not near to either of them. And so the letter to Colossae goes through, there's various things, various teachings, various conversations, and it comes to the end, And it says, when this letter is read among you, have it also read in the church of the Laodiceans. And you, for your part, read my letter that is coming from Laodicea. So basically, he wrote a letter to both. And for whatever reason, he wants he's sent both letters to each individual place, but he wants his communication in each of the letters to go to both. So he's now saying, look at both of them.
Here's what I'm saying to you, here's what I said to them.
Right. So presumably there's some additional information, and he wrote stuff A here, stuff B. Yeah, and it could. That's a good point. I mean, it could just simply be a convenience issue that he wrote half. He didn't want to write it all twice, so he just wrote half, gave it to each, and then wanted them to switch later down the road. And handwriting, well, getting those hand cramps. I mean, it logistically makes sense to do something like that. So the question is, that this text, which later became a scriptural text, what authority does this sentence give to the letter of Laodicea, which does not survive? We don't have it. So that's an interesting question to think about. All right, so thanks everybody for coming. Really appreciate it. Our time has come. I think there's some people I met briefly at the beginning, so I'd be happy to meet you in a bit more depth. I think I've given everyone a copy of discussion 3, which is going to be the group exercise. The group exercise for that is another text. This is at least for me, it's a really fun text. It's a really interesting text. It's going to be even more. We're going to look at it blind again, and it's going to be even more blind as we go through it. So, but it's really fun to do, and it's really fun to do blind because that's the best way to look about it. So, read that. If there will be confusing stuff. Just don't pay attention to it. We'll work through whatever issues we need to work through. That's about it. So feel free to eat more. There's more cake and stuff, so feel free to have that. And thanks everybody for coming. If we do have a Facebook group for this, so if you wanted, the easiest way for us all to communicate is for everyone to join the Facebook group. So come talk to me. And there's not a whole lot of traffic on it. It's more just the invitations and so forth go out. So feel free to do that. So thanks everybody for coming.